All right, friends, welcome back to our online Bible study in the Gospel of John. And this week, we're going to be in chapter 13. So today, to set it up, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the whole chapter, and then we're going to really hone in on the beginning of it. A lot of really powerful stuff happens in this chapter, and a lot of stuff that you're probably familiar with, even if you've never read the Gospel of John before. Jesus washing the disciples' feet happens here. Jesus predicting that he'll be betrayed happens here. Jesus predicting that Peter's going to deny him happens here. And at the very end, well, actually right before the prediction of the denial, but kind of as the culmination of this chapter, you have Jesus giving a new commandment, which we'll talk about later this week. So a lot happens in this chapter. And we'll talk as we get later on to the week, how all of this kind of fits together, what's happening here. But today, I want to hone in on the beginning, which the first section, which is the foot washing, takes up a lot of it. So I want to show you kind of the most typical way that this is read. And it's read in this way, I think, rightly, and I think that is really important. I want to show you that. And then I also want to show you something that I think is less obvious, but just as important here. So we're just going to read through the beginning of this. Verse 1. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father. So this is the very end. He knows that he's got just a little time left. So this is what he's going to do with the disciples with this little bit of time that he's got left. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. That's going to be really important later on in this week when we wrap the whole deal up. Loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. So I think part of what we can take away here is that there's a threat to the community here. And the threat to Jesus' life is actually coming from within his close-knit community. So there's a threat to the community here. And Jesus knew that the Father had put all these things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. I thought that when I was reading this week, I thought it's so interesting that the author here inserts that here. And so I was reading this week and doing a little bit of research. One of the suggestions that I think is really, really good is that when we read about the foot washing, what we often think about is how amazing it is that Jesus being their rabbi, Jesus being like their leader, bending down and washing their feet. And while that is obviously very, very important, I think the reason that John inserts this in here is to remind us that there's actually something even more profound happening. It's not just that the greatest human among them is stooping down and washing their feet, but it's a reminder that who Jesus is, as Jesus is, remember back to chapter 1, the incarnate Logos, that Jesus is the one with all power, that Jesus is God himself, that he himself, God himself in Jesus, is stooping down to wash their feet. It's also the image that we'll see in just a minute of him taking off his outer garment. It's similar to the idea of Philippians 2, where it talks about how Jesus empties himself in order to become human. Or think about John 10, where the Good Shepherd lays down his life. He's laying down this garment, setting aside the power that he has as the incarnate Word of God, as the Son of God, humbling himself to wash their feet. It's no mere master human. It's God himself who's doing this. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, like we were just talking about, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. I'm going to leave the next little bit for you to read on your own. It describes an interaction that he has with Peter, where Peter's kind of scandalized by this. And then make sure that you see verses 12 through 17, where Jesus talks explicitly about why he's done this. The reason he's done this is he's setting an example for them. As I serve you, you serve one another. That's the obvious way that we read this. And the thing that is as important as it is obvious, that Jesus is showing us, if I serve you, you should serve one another. This gets to the love commandment at the end of the chapter, the new commandment. But there's something else here that I think is equally as important. Think about the filth that were on these folks' feet. They're walking around in sandals. They're walking around on dirt roads. The filth that is on their feet. And Jesus goes to each of their filthy feet and washes them. think one of the things that we are also meant to see here is that Jesus is not someone that we present ourselves to perfectly cleaned. If we had to be perfectly clean to present ourselves to Jesus, none of us ever would. But that we present ourselves in all of our filth to him. There is nothing that has dirtied us so deeply that we can't present ourselves to Jesus. And if that is the case, what does Jesus then also say? He says, love each other the way that I love you. Which means that we should be a community of people. We should be a group of folks who can present ourselves filthy to one another. And then in community, with Jesus at the center of that community, find cleansing and find healing. So often, especially in many of the communities that we run around in, we seek to present ourselves to people as if we are perfectly pure. We present the best parts of our lives. Friends, we've got to be a community where we can present ourselves to each other filthy. Here's my mess. Here's my junk. Because it is when we present ourselves to one another filthy that we as a community with Christ at the center can offer one another words of hope and words of healing and offer each other practical assistance to find the hope and the help and the cleansing that comes through Jesus. So I hope that you see and hear the foot washing, that Jesus is calling us to be humble servants, but that Jesus is also calling us to be people who are willing to present ourselves filthy before him and filthy before the community. Because a community that is founded with Jesus at the center is a place where we can come as a mess and find healing. God bless you, friends. Keep with the reading. We'll see you next time.